Hey, it's Mika. Sorry about all the background noise in this recording. The dogs across the street will not shut up, and I can't do anything about it. Anyways. Deku? I think he's some pro. By Clouds. My head in the clouds not coming down. Chapter 46. Great Minds. Nezu sipped his tea and scrolled through the news as he waited for Midoriya to arrive for his lesson. When he had suggested Midoriya to get some good old-fashioned revenge on his middle school, he hadn't anticipated just how far the boy would go. Especially after their first lesson, when Midoriya had been hesitant to even consider the idea of ruining someone's reputation. Nezu had expected they would take down Aldera, then Midoriya would politely say that he wasn't all that fond of the experience, and that would be the end of it. Instead, Midoriya had surprised him, by not only deciding that society at large was at fault for his abuse, but also by taking steps to change the system. And what was most surprising was that it was working. Midoriya's first article had made waves simply by suggesting that society might be broken and hurting both the strong and the weak, but his second article was causing outrage. Nezu made a mental note that he needed to teach Midoriya more about rhetoric, because he already seemed to be a natural at it. Imagine how powerful Midoriya's words could be if that skill was honed. His word choice alone was enough to produce the effect he was looking for, with words like manipulation and weaponizing children. Anyone who read it would immediately be up in arms. The fact that Midoriya had used statistics to back up his vitriol was simply icing on the cake. Some journalists were also wondering if the abuses Midoriya had pointed out in the school system were the reason so many people turned to villainy. Midoriya had been careful to put the focus of each of his articles on powerful quirk students, to force people to care, but his article had been worded in such a way that it was clear that the system was hurting both the strong and the weak. It wasn't a large jump in logic, therefore, to assume that both those groups were being pushed towards villainy. The proximity alarm outside his office beeped, and Nezu looked at the cameras to see Midoriya approaching the door. He smiled and hopped off his chair to open the door, right as Midoriya raised his hand to knock. What could he say? It was the simple things that made him smile. "Good morning, Midoriya," he chirped. "How are your morning classes?" "How do you always do that?" Midoriya muttered as he walked in. Morning classes were good, just hero names and stuff, so kind of repetitive for me. I was happy to see that Shinso made it in, though. What made you decide to transfer him? He didn't end up making it to the podium." "Yes, that's true." Nezu sat back down behind the desk and poured Midoriya a cup of tea. But in all the fights he did have, he showed remarkable skill and ingenuity. Aizawa especially pushed for his admittance after proclaiming he had much more potential than Mineta, who probably shouldn't have been allowed in the hero course in the first place. Though, of course, the entrance exam only shows us quirks and fighting ability, not sexual harassment and selfishness. Theoretically, that's what one's academic record is for, but most of the time incidents remain unreported as long as you have a strong enough quirk. Midoriya finished. "Yes, I know. That's what I'm trying to change." "And you're doing a fine job," Nezu grinned. "Have you been tracking the fallout from your latest article?" Midoriya shook his head. "Not really, no. I mean, I did check a little yesterday, but today's been kinda busy." "Well then, let me show you." Nezu pulled up some of the more interesting reaction pieces he found and showed the screen to Midoriya. "First of all, Sakauchi has actually opened an investigation into your old school as a result of this article. That part hasn't made it to the news yet, but I figured you'd want to know." Midoriya stared at him with wide eyes. Really? People can get in trouble with the law just because of some negative press? A more accurate way to say that would be that the press sometimes brings issues to law enforcement's attention, Nezu chirped. The police can't arrest a villain if they don't know of their crimes, after all. Midoriya bit his lip and looked like he wanted to say something, but wasn't quite sure how to bring it up. Well, Nezu's interest was piqued. Whatever Midoriya had to say, he hoped that it would lead to just as much chaos as their lessons had so far. "You have something on your mind, Midoriya," Nezu prompted. "What is it?" Midoriya hesitated for another long moment. "What if... Well, I mean, I wanted to finish our campaign against Aldera now, so that... It's probably weird and maybe we shouldn't go after..." Nezu frowned for a moment as he tried to make sense of Midoriya's mumblings. Whatever was on his mind was obviously causing him great anxiety. "Midoriya, you said you wanted to finish smearing Aldera. Is that because you have a new target in mind?" Midoriya smiled sheepishly. "But, I mean, it'll probably work, but we'll have to be really careful not to completely destabilize society, so it'll probably be really dangerous." Nezu grinned in excitement. Teaching Midoriya would never be dull, would it? Nezu didn't even know what Midoriya had in mind, but he was already looking forward to it. Besides, the destabilizing of society sounded like just high enough stakes to make their next project interesting. "I'm all ears, Midoriya." "Well, you know how Todoroki didn't want to use his fire at the sports festival?" Nezu nodded. Yes, he was quite adamant that he would never use his fire in battle. Midoriya took a deep breath. "I found out why." Nezu gestured for Midoriya to continue and took a sip of tea. "Endeavor's abusive." Nezu choked a little on the tea, and Midoriya rushed to grab a tissue to hand to him as he recovered. "I'm so sorry, Nezu. I probably should have waited until you were done drinking. I have terrible timing and..." "It's quite all right, Midoriya," Nezu said. "It was simply a unexpected revelation." "Would you mind explaining how you know this? Endeavor can be quite harsh with the villains he faces, but that does not mean that roughness extends to his own family." "Todoroki told me." Midoriya looked small as he played with his hands. "He said that Endeavor forced his mom into a quirk marriage so that he'd have a kid with a perfect blend of ice and fire, so that he could surpass All Might. It goes way beyond a simple rivalry. Endeavor is forcing his own child to fight his war." Nezu's brain kicked into overdrive as the pieces belatedly fell into place. Todoroki refused to use the fire side of his quirk, and only the fire side. Endeavor's wife, who by all accounts had decent mental health before her marriage, had been hospitalized for brutally attacking her own son, and yet Todoroki had no problems using the ice side of his quirk that he had inherited from her. Endeavor's wedding, which should have been a major event with how high he'd been in the hero rankings even then, had almost qualified as an elopement, and his in-laws lived well above their station. Nezu had assumed they were being paid under the table for something, but he thought it was drugs, not... "I wish I could say I was surprised," Nezu said finally. "But what do you expect us to do about this? As much as I know that we need to help Todoroki, accusing the number 2 hero of child abuse would destabilize the hero system and most likely the Japanese government," Midoriya finished. "I know, which is why we can't arrest him, but that doesn't mean we can't bring him down." Nezu poured himself another cup of tea to replace the one he'd lost to his spit take. "Color me intrigued, Midoriya. Care to explain?" Midoriya nodded eagerly. "If Endeavor's abuse would come to light now, people would lose faith in heroes as an institution, rather than the one hero that is guilty. However, if we gradually make people lose faith in Endeavor, both as a hero and a person, then when his abuse eventually comes to light, no one will be surprised. They'll simply say, 'We knew it all along,' and keep their faith in the hero system." Nezu took a sip of tea. "Interesting idea, Midoriya. So, you're not saying that Endeavor cannot be arrested, but that he cannot be arrested right now? Exactly. And how would you propose destroying the people's faith in Endeavor? Nezu prompted. It's going to be extraordinarily difficult to make people believe badly in the number 2 hero. Well, I was thinking we could start by pointing out his temper, Midoriya said. Are you sure that's going to work? Nezu asked. Endeavor's temper is well known, and there are people who love him not only in spite of his anger, but because of it. I don't know. Midoriya thought for a minute. I still think it's the best place to begin, actually, because that's precisely because everyone already knows about his temper. If I ask people to believe that Endeavor is a horrible human being right out of the gate, people would just laugh me off, but if I start with something they know... Nezu grinned. Then they'll be more likely to swallow what comes after. It seems you've been paying attention to our lessons, Midoriya. That's good, but Endeavor's temper is just the beginning. So what next? Midoriya's eyes gleamed with intelligence and determination, and Nezu felt a thrill as he realized the boy had already thought that through. Next, we deal with his collateral damage until people are convinced that it's the highest in the industry. That will probably take several articles to drive the point home. Next, we deal with his overkill towards the villains he fights. Excellent, Nezu said. But I believe you should switch those 2 points. Can you tell me why? No. Midoriya frowned and began muttering. It can't be because of the severity, because hurting a human being is obviously worse than hurting a building or a road, but then again, many people don't necessarily see villains as human beings, at least not in the same ways. Oh. Nezu smiled again as Midoriya's eyes widened in realization. Endeavor's behavior towards villains is objectively worse than his collateral damage, Midoriya said. But it's also pretty far removed from the average person's everyday life, just like Endeavor's temper is. The damage that Endeavor does to buildings and infrastructure, though, impacts civilians directly. We could even point out that civilians could be in those buildings that Endeavor burns down to really make it hit close to home. And since we're starting off small and highlighting more dangerous offenses as time goes on, putting civilian damages after villain damages only makes sense. Nezu nodded. Very good, Midoriya. I do believe that this plan of yours has potential. Do keep an eye on Todoroki, however. We don't want Endeavor taking his frustrations out on his son when his reputation starts to plunge. Midoriya frowned. I hadn't even thought about that. Don't worry about it too much, Nezu winked. Perhaps by the time that Endeavor begins to see a meaningful dip in the polls, hurting Todoroki won't be an option anymore. Midoriya shot him a look. You just enjoy being cryptic, don't you? Nezu simply cackled. Chapter 47. What kind of hero do you want to be? Congrats on getting so many offers, man, Kirishima said. You impressed a lot of pros. I don't care about impressing washed-up D-listers, Katsuki huffed. They don't matter. Besides, you impressed some pros too, didn't you? Kirishima smiled brightly. Yeah, it's so awesome. I kind of wish Crimson Riot was still active so I could intern with him, but that's the problem with liking old heroes, right? Any of those offers from pros with hardening quirks? Katsuki asked. He really shouldn't be wasting time like this. He didn't need friends to be the best. No, man. It kinda sucks, Kirishima said. But then again, quirks are so unique it's really not that surprising. I think I'll go with fourth kind. He's pretty manly, right? He's the extra with the 4 arms, right? He's not an extra, Bakugo. Kirishima sighed. He's a pro. Whatever. Hey, Kirishima! Hey, Blasty! Ashido waved as she ran up to them. I have a name, Raccoon Eyes. So do I. Ashido smiled. But you've got nicknames for all of us, so we get a nickname for you. I wanted Explodo Boy, but Kirishima thought Blasty was better. Hey, don't bring me into this, Kirishima protested, blushing slightly in his embarrassment. You guys are the ones that insisted he needed a nickname. But you're the one that can take his explosions, so you're the one that gets to take the fall, Ashido said cheerfully. So, the gang's going out for ice cream during free period. You guys want to come? Heck yeah! Kirishima pumped his fist. What about you, Bakugo? You coming? I'm busy, extras, Katsuki grumbled. I don't care what you do. Oh no, we've been demoted back to extras, Kirishima, Ashido said dramatically. Blasty must be in a mood. All the more reason he needs ice cream, Kirishima fake whispered. Come on, dude. You sure you don't want to come? Katsuki scowled. I already said I was fucking busy, shitty hair. Alright. Kirishima held up his hands appeasingly. But it's an open invitation, okay? We'd love to have you if you want, but you do you. Ashido grabbed Kirishima's arms and started dragging him away. Come on, I want to try their new unicorn flavor. Bye, Blasty. Katsuki frowned as they left, then spun on his heel and started stalking towards Hound Dog's office. Even if he didn't have therapy today, he still wouldn't have gone to ice cream. He didn't have friends, and he never had. He just had some extras that followed him around and told me he was the best, and I was all he ever needed. He didn't know if Kirishima and the others fell into that category or not. None of the old extras had ever given him a stupid nickname or anything like that, but that's probably what they were. Just extras following him around. But if they knew that he needed a therapist, they would never think he was the best again, so Katsuki would have to be careful to never let that slip around any of them. Especially Mr. Sunshine Kirishima. Katsuki didn't bother knocking on the door. Instead, he kicked it open and grinned when the mutt yelped in surprise. He closed the door behind him and went to sit on the couch as the Hound Dog glared at him. You know, it's usually polite to wait for permission before barging into a room. Come on, mutt. If I waited for permission, then I wouldn't be barging, Kirishima said. Besides, if you didn't want me walking in, you'd lock the door. Hound Dog rolled his eyes. I'll be sure to do that in the future. How are you doing? It's been a few days since the sports festival, so you've gotten a chance to rest, right? Yeah. I slept the whole day after the festival, so don't worry about me. Katsuki snorted. And your quirk? Hound Dog said. I know you pushed yourself to quirk exhaustion in a few of your fights. My wrists are a little tender, but nothing I can't handle, Katsuki replied. Hound Dog nodded. Good. Then that means we can get to the good stuff. He looked at Katsuki intensely. Let's talk about what happened at the sports festival. Katsuki resisted the urge to fidget. What's there to talk about? It's over, isn't it? I took the damn medal like you wanted me to, so what else do you want? I want you to tell me what was going through your head when Todoroki wouldn't use his fire in the last match, Hound Dog said. Katsuki wondered how long it had been since the mutt had swept his office. There were some black flecks of dust that had ground themselves into the wood over time, making it look dirtier than it probably was. His mum would have a field day if she saw it, and would probably try to swear it clean. Hound Dog sighed. I'm not here to judge you, Bakugo, but I need to know what's going on in your brain so I can help you. Now we're just going to explore what happened. We're not even going to label anything as good or bad just yet. Can you do that? Katsuki shrugged. Good enough, Hound Dog said. So? If Icy Hot didn't use his fire, I couldn't prove I was better than him at full strength. Katsuki finally grumbled.
I already told you that before the medal ceremony.
You're right, you did. Hound Dog nodded.
But I wanted to check in again and see if anything had changed or become clearer now that you've had a few days to think about it.
Katsuki thought for a moment.
It's just so fucking confusing. You told me I did good and I got internship offers, so other people must think the same thing, but it doesn't feel like a win. So the question now is whether you were trying to prove something to everyone watching, or to yourself.
Katsuki shot Hound Dog an unimpressed look.
Why would I have to prove anything to myself? I know I'm the best.
Do you? Hound Dog asked. Then why do you constantly need everyone else to tell you that? What? Of course Katsuki was the best. He'd known it ever since he got his quirk, so the mutt just didn't know what he was talking about. And if he was constantly trying to prove something to everyone else so that he'd know they believed it too, well, that didn't mean shit.
Here's what I think, Hound Dog continued. And I might be wrong about this, obviously, so feel free to tell me. But I think you've lived your entire life believing in a false dichotomy. In your experience, people are either the best or they're worthless. There is no in-between. And since there can only be one number one, then your worth is constantly hanging by a thread, and everything and everyone is a threat to that. That's why you blow up so easily. Because when other people do things, it doesn't matter what they do, they're directly threatening your worth as a person, and you risk failing from your position of superiority and ending up on the ground with all the other useless extras.
Was that... Well, Katsuki wouldn't have put it in so many words, but then again, he hadn't known he'd needed words for it. He just thought that was the way the world worked. But the blunt way Hound Dog had put it, it sounded almost ridiculous. Was that not how everyone experienced things?
Let's say you're right, Katsuki huffed. What would we do about it?
Well, we'd need to challenge it. Hound Dog grinned, so his sharp teeth were on full display behind his muzzle.
Unless you're not up for the challenge. I'm always up to a challenge, mutt! Katsuki yelled. So what do I do? Find the lie. Let's start with that dichotomy I talked about. People are either the best or they're worthless. Find the lie. That's obvious. Yeah, sure, All Might's number one, but that doesn't mean that other heroes in the top 10 like Hawks and Genus to nothing.
Hound Dog's eyes narrowed.
You were about to include Endeavor on that list, but didn't. Why?
Katsuki shrunk slightly.
I don't want to be like Endeavor. Why not? Out of all the heroes in Japan, he's the one with a temper that can rival your own. But I want to be able to turn mine off! Katsuki yelled.
Hound Dog's eyes widened.
Alright, that's a good goal and I'll help you, but what makes you think Endeavor can't turn his off? I don't know if that's my secret to tell. Damn, he was starting to turn into Deku and mumbling everything.
Unfortunately, Hound Dog's quirk gave him excellent hearing.
Then whose secret is it?
Katsuki kept his eyes on the floor, and when he spoke, his voice was softer than it had been since he manifested his quirk.
I used to look up to Endeavor. I thought, he's an asshole too, and that meant I wasn't wrong for being so angry. It was just another reason I was destined to be the best, but he's not just a jerk, he hurt Icy Hot. Hurt him for years, just like...
Katsuki couldn't bring himself to continue, but Hound Dog seemed to realize that there was more he needed to say.
Just like what, Bakugo? Just like I hurt Deku, Katsuki growled. There, I said it. I hurt the damn nerd and that was wrong. But I don't want to be like that bastard anymore. I want to be better. I don't want to be a hero like Endeavor.
Hound Dog let out a deep breath.
Then what kind of hero do you want to be?
Katsuki looked up and met Hound Dog's eyes.
What?
Hound Dog smiled.
You heard me. What kind of hero do you want to be, Bakugo? Not what kind of hero do you think is the best, or what kind of hero your old teachers told you were going to be. No, I want to know what kind of hero Katsuki Bakugo wants to be. I don't know anymore, Katsuki said softly. I always thought I was going to be King Explosion Murder, but Midnight shut that name down for being too violent. And she's right, I don't want to be a violent hero like Endeavor, but I also don't think I can be a smiling hero like All Might. That's okay, Hound Dog said. It may be harder sometimes, but you are allowed to be your own person, Bakugo. You are allowed to forge your own path. I think you can do it. Of course I am, Mutt.
Katsuki smiled briefly.
But I don't know what that path is yet. Am I allowed to think about it? Hound Dog nodded. Let's have that be your homework this week. I'm not expecting you to have all the answers by our next session, but I'll give you a chance next time to talk about what you discovered, alright?
Katsuki nodded and stood to leave.
Oh, and Mutt, if you breathe a word about this to anyone, you're dead.
Hound Dog gave a barking laugh.
There's the Bakugo we know and love. Have a good week.
Katsuki rolled his eyes.
Whatever, Mutt.
Dyoinu waited until Bakugo had left, before picking up his phone and dialing Nezu.
We need to talk about Todoroki.
Hey, it's Mika. If you enjoyed this podfic, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel or following me on Spotify for updates and new content weekly. Also, consider supporting me on Ko-Fi, link in the description. Anyways, I hope that you have a great day or night, and that your favorite author posts the exact fanfiction you visualized when you were meant to be doing work yesterday. Until next time.